What is up, people of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and fellow variants out there? Welcome to my Loki Episode 4 breakdown, recap, and review. And my god, today we've got quite a bit to talk about. A very refreshing episode after last week's, of which quite a few fans, not all fans, but a majority of fans felt like somewhat along the way there was a bit of lackluster aspects to last week's. But this week's, they pack a lot of punches into Sylvie's backstory, quite a few revelations, some expected, but despite revelations being given to us, some questions are still very much so raised as a result of some answers that we've been given, and that's kind of what I love. That gets us really thirsting for the next week's episode, with answers only leading to more mysteries. And yeah, we have a few theories, we get some more little teasers for other clues out there, and I can't wait to dive into it, so I'm dying to hear your thoughts in the comments down below with any theories and speculations you have, especially with that mid/post-credits-y kind of scene as well. And like the video if you do go on to enjoy, and of course subscribe for more little breakdowns like this. So today's episode picked up with a younger Sylvie, or Lady Loki, but I guess we're gonna try and call her Sylvie from now on. It's gonna be hard to kind of burn the Lady Loki out of my head, but we see her in her younger past, her Asgard. TVA locate her and address her as the Variant, and it turns out that it is a younger overseeing judge, who is of course Ravonna Renslayer, and you don't see her aged at all. Now I don't think this is because it's a previous version of her or anything like that. It's the same version, but as we know, time runs differently in the TVA, so yeah, it appears as if she hasn't aged a day. And we actually see her grab Ravonna's tempad and use it to open a time door and escape, which completely matches up with what we heard Sylvie say last episode, with how she's been on the run from the Timekeepers her whole life. Now, I wasn't sure if that was an exaggeration, but I was talking about it in last week's review. I was like, really? Your whole life? But yeah, she really has. Now, all of this was happening as kind of a little flashbacky memory or remembrance as Ravonna was going up in the golden elevator to the location of the Timekeeper's vault, or little council room, if you will. And we got a little bit of a tease of them, and I thought, oh, I bet this is all we're gonna get, but no, we got a lot more. And of course, they were surrounded in this mystifying smoke, but obviously starting off the episode this way made me very giddy. One thing that piqued my curiosity about Ravonna Renslayer is that she, when she was looking upon those androids, shall we say, still looked upon them with quite a bit of fear. She was intimidated. So did she quite know that they weren't exactly the real Timekeepers, and there was like a puppet master behind them, possibly Kang the Conqueror, or maybe some other theories that you guys have? Is she aware that those weren't actual 3 space lizards? That is still a question coming out of this week's episode, even though she knows a lot more than what she's even been letting on. Directly after this, we see Mobius with Ravonna, and he wants access to Hunter C-20, and Ravonna says to Mobius that that is just impossible. And obviously, not all was revealed in this moment, but I was very happy that Mobius was really on the ball of figuring out what C-20 meant by saying it's real, because in last week's breakdown, I was dying to know what it was exactly about. Was it the fragmented memory or something further? Which obviously all leads into the revelation that they're all variants in the TVA. But now, though, it was just pitched to Mobius that she died because her mind was scrambled. But obviously, yeah, her mind was a little bit scrambled to Mobius before, but not as far gone as what Ravonna was, labeling it out to be. And this is where his doubts started to happen. Even though I think he had doubts for quite some time, something felt a little bit off. Well, in this episode, it really started to unravel. Meanwhile, on Lamentis, with the literal apocalypse happening, we had Sylvie and Loki just kind of taking it in. And to be fair, annihilation and apocalypse aside, that is quite a view to behold. We had Sylvie reminisce over her time in Asgard and how she doesn't remember much of it, considering she was taken when she was very young. I found it interesting in how she spoke about the universe wanting to break free, so it manifests chaos, like in the form of her being born the goddess of mischief. And as soon as that created a big enough detour from the timeline, the TVA showed up, erased her reality, and took her prisoner. Now sure, like you could say the universe wants to break free and it creates, gods of mischief like Loki and Sylvie, but I think there's a little bit more to it than that, because that obviously isn't the actual explanation itself as to why Sylvie got taken. That is still a mystery that I'm dying to know, even though this is one form of explanation, I guess, that she's kind of just thinking, yeah, like I'm a god of mischief, so it was only a matter of time before a big enough detour from the sacred timeline occurred, and that she was taken by the TVA. She wonders if that's what makes a Loki Loki and how they're maybe destined to lose, but I loved Loki's response by saying, no, we may lose sometimes, maybe even sometimes painfully, but we don't die. We survive. Which is obviously a very big nod to the very ending, where we literally saw our Loki get pruned, for all we knew in that moment died, even though that wasn't going to be the end, but then in the end kind of credit scene, where we saw the 3 Lokis who have seemingly survived. As Loki had just said himself, no, we may lose, sometimes painfully, but we don't die, and they're just standing there amongst this, I believe, a ruined New York, because I think we saw like a ruined Avengers Tower there, which, yet again, furthers such intrigue. And does this apply to everyone who gets pruned? Is Mobius right now chilling in like a ruined area, but on a jet ski? I don't know if this just applies to Loki's. We're just gonna have to wait and see there. But more on this, obviously, as we reach that moment. After Loki had kind of gushed over Sylvie and how he called her amazing for being the one responsible for running rings around the TVA, they kind of hold hands. Now, I don't know if this is properly meant to signify a proper outright romance, because the showrunner did say previously in an interview with Vanity Fair that there is a love between a duo, but whatever affection exists isn't romantic. So I think everyone, even though it is kind of easy to take a little bit of romance out of that, especially with some of the remarks that Mobius makes about his girlfriend and how it's this sick, twisted thing, because of course he would fall for himself, and that is something that could be explored, but I think you're meant to take out the fact that they're just kind of not alone. They found this connection with each other. Loki, as a character, has always felt outcasted in how he was obviously brought up in our MCU version, but also how this other variant, Sylvie, has been alone her whole life after being freaking kidnapped from a very young age with no explanation as of right now. So she's always felt like an outcast and alone. And finally, these 2 Lokis, who are technically the same being, have got each other, and that's the connection and bonds they have. So even though, you know, they held hands in this moment in an affectionate way, it wasn't romantic despite all of the romance you could take out of certain scenes. They deeply, deeply care about one another, even though you could argue that's a bit quick, but you can see that from our Loki and how he cared about when Mobius was teasing that she did indeed die. I really liked those scenes as well, and I don't necessarily think that's too rushed. I think if you have a immediate bond with another character who is technically you technically understand each other more than any other person could, it would lead to kind of an emotional weight pretty quickly, I can imagine. So as a result of them holding hands in this connection, if you will, it creates a temporal spiky thing that is kind of being picked up in the sacred timeline. It starts branching up into a point of where they've never seen a branch like this. And so they locate them, 2 time doors open, they kind of have no choice but to go through, and they are arrested, which picks up finally with some Mobius and Loki scenes, because I've been looking forward to these 2 properly interacting again. And Loki reveals that the TVA is lying to him. It obviously isn't sold in this very moment, but this leads us to a little time cell that Loki is put in, and this is pretty funny because he's in a time loop, and I believe this even is borrowed from Norse mythology, when Loki actually cuts Thor's wife's hair, Siv's hair, and that was kind of cool seeing her come in with a little lock of her hair off, kept beating on him. But yeah, if I remember correctly, that is taken out of Norse mythology. I think it is the very same character as well, but I'm a bit hazy on that. Now, in these moments, it is very heavily put on your nose as to the message. But he tries to apologize to Siv, saying that he's scared of being alone, and then she keeps repeating, you are alone, and you always will be, which, I mean, if you kind of zoom out a little bit, it's very transparent what they're doing. You're alone, you're alone, oh look, there's another Loki, Sylvie, oh, they have a connection where they kind of feel like they're not alone. Well, the end of this show, they're gonna kind of have found each other and not feel as alone. So yeah, very, very obvious message here, but one that I can definitely get on board with, because I think this episode, even more than last episode, it's not that I didn't enjoy Sylvie last episode, but I think the filler aspect of it, to an extent, you know, I don't fully subscribe to the filler thing, but it was a bit like, oh, okay, well, even though this is offering funny parts to a character, I'm still not sucked in. But this episode really sold me on the chemistry between them both, and just both characters in general. Obviously, I love Loki, but Sylvie as a duo, I really love them now, and I think this is my favorite episode of the series so far. Mobius approaches Ravonna because he wants to interrogate Sylvie, Lady Loki, but she's like, no, and I think we all know why she doesn't want him to, because that would lead to him finding out the many secrets of the TVA, or at least a few that Sylvie has, such as one of them being that they're all variants. Around about this time of the episode as well, we got a very, very cool reference, because Mobius said, we've brought in Kree, Titans, vampires. But why is it that too often demigods are such a pain in the ass? Now, vampires. So have they brought in variant versions of Blade? Because as we do know, vampires are coming. They really are coming in the future. We are getting some Blade content, but like, yeah, I guess this was a very, very small seed being sown for that, but it's still really cool to imagine like a variant Blade being brought in. I mean, how cool would that be if they did a little Easter egg of that in the background somewhere? Now, in this moment, Mobius finally brings Loki out of his little time cell loop. He also, as we discussed earlier, teases him about how they're both swooning over each other. But anyway, cutting to the chase, Loki reveals to Mobius that they are all variants. Everyone who works in the TVA, the Timekeepers didn't create them. They actually kidnapped you and all of you from the timeline and erased your memories. Now, Mobius was like, yeah, nice try, but he knows deep down that there is something wrong, which leads him on a little spiral staircase to finding out. And I really like that line from Loki, where he says that out of all the lies in this place, and there are a great many, you're the biggest. Then he further clarifies, no, I mean the lies you tell to yourself. Because I think we've all seen since episode 1, Mobius, he really does push a lot to the side. When he's given explanations, even without all of the clues, he's given explanations that are just hard to believe in of itself. Oh, we were all created by the Timekeepers. So you're just accepting that you were birthed by space lizards? Like, what? If that was me, I would need to look into how I got here. Like, is there false memories that implant him there, that make him feel like he has a beginning? All of this isn't actually clarified, and I'm dying to know what just makes everyone accept their lot in life at the TVA. After this, Mobius is cheersing with Ravonna. They're kind of celebrating. This is technically case closed on the whole Loki variant thing, because they've got Sylvie, they've got our Loki. It's kind of a done and dusted deal, right? He keeps poking in questions at this time, and it's kind of making Ravonna feel uncomfortable, which just leads into the further theories of how Ravonna may have gone through this before with many Mobiuses, because there's lots of theories circling around on the internet with how, you know, the reference to the coffee cup and how that's been there, creating a little coffee stain circles many times, and it's like, that must be your other analysts, and how I want to be your favorite analyst. Well, what if those other analysts were Mobius this whole time, and he's kind of just been this same variant that keeps getting borrowed from the timeline, and I guess you could say replaced and put in, which is why every time he keeps trying to make that same mistake on the coffee mat kind of thing. Do you see where I'm going with that? It could be that, which could also make the fact that our Mobius got pruned a little bit less devastating, because we could just get another one even though it's not the same one. But then again, as without going too much off on a tangent here, what if the pruning doesn't actually kill you but just kind of exiles you to another place, like that post-apocalyptic New York of Avengers Tower ruined place? I'm not sure about that. We still have yet to see if that's just a Loki exclusive thing. But even if it doesn't kill you, why doesn't it kill you? Why doesn't it kill anyone? Why go through the effort of programming those little wands to teleport people? Why just not actually have it kill them? I'm still wondering all of this kind of stuff. Either way, though, our boy Mobius, after peak suspicion, replaces her tempad with his, so he now has her tempad, and he uses this opportunity to look at Hunter C20's profile, and he accesses a recording of her interrogation after the events of the storm. And we hear Hunter C20 saying, "You're not hearing me. I was there. This was real. What I saw. This is a place where I've been. This wasn't a TVA. It was a memory. I lived down there. I went to that bar. I had a whole life on the sacred timeline," which basically solidifies it to Mobius that, oh crap, this whole place is one big facade. Now, as a result of this, Mobius goes straight to Loki. I love their bromance, honestly. Like, obviously we have the casting with Tom Hiddleston as Loki, but I'm so grateful for Owen Wilson being in this show. I think he just works perfectly. I don't know why I'm gushing so much in this moment. I guess I just loved it when he came in. It's like, right, I guess we've got to kind of work together now and then, even though it ended in a sad way for Mobius, temporarily that is. He seeks this reassurance out of Loki, asking him does he swear that she didn't implant those memories in Hunter C20, because he was right about the TVA if so, and he was right from the beginning. I think why I love this moment so much, they have to trust each other, and Loki offers his kind of relationship, if you will, as a friend, which you could say Loki's lying, but you can tell he's being serious in that moment. So there's trust in this moment between these two. They're friends now, kind of officially, if you will. But when they got back through the time doors from Loki's time cell, Ravonna was waiting for him there with guards. And this moment was just fantastic as well. I don't know what it is. Maybe it was just the acting, but it was just Mobius knowing that this was it. Like, how are you going to get out of this situation? I think Owen Wilson tried to choke his character up a little bit there, almost not get teary, but like he knew this was his end. So he revisits that conversation he had earlier with Ravonna saying, you know where I'd go if I could go anywhere, wherever it is that I'm actually from. I love that little dig there at the TVA. Yeah, wherever I had a life before the TVA came along. Maybe I had a jet ski. That's what I'd like to do. Just riding around on my jet ski. She says prune him, and so he gets pruned. And once again, I'm dying to know if that just teleported him somewhere, which I think it is most likely the case, because I can't figure out right now, why would Lokis just survive if they're pruned? Surely everyone who gets pruned is sent somewhere else, but like that doesn't guarantee they end up surviving in such a harsh place, because we can't forget that when we saw those 3 Lokis in the end credit scene, he's like, am I alive? Is this hell? He's like, well, you won't be for much longer unless you come with us. Well, that place is very dangerous, clearly. And I'm guessing they just, when they prune people get teleported there and they end up dying through the environment or whatever danger is lurking there. But I kind of skimmed over something for the sake of chronology, just so we could speak about that. But we did have B-15 speak to Sylvie after her evidently having quite a bit of a hard time this episode, kind of just trying to reconcile with the fact after she got enchanted that she's been having some doubts of her own. So she opens a time door and asks Sylvie to come with her, and she takes her to the night of the Roxcart store, where she said that when she was in her head that she saw something. What did she do to her? And essentially she reveals to B-15 that those were real memories, and the TVA has got you all fooled, you're all variants, and you had a life. And I think that would be pretty devastating and revelationary for anyone to learn. But the most interesting thing about B-15 is that she was the most variant prejudice, if you know what I mean. She was like, she treated any variant like, and now she's a variant herself. So that is kind of such a 180, but such an organic one, at least I feel, for this character to then help out the way she did in just a few moments' time. But either way, guys, end of the episode now, at least nearing the end, we see Sylvie and Loki go to the elevators. So in the elevator ride, she says, do you remember me? And Ravonna says, I do. What do you want to say to me, variant? Which just makes me think, screw you, Ravonna. Aren't you a variant? But is that not just a question we should be asking? If she's referring to these others, like, what do you want to say to me, variant? Does that mean if she's so cocky about calling others variants, is she not a variant herself? Or is she? That's the thing. Maybe Ravonna isn't a variant. Or like she went there very willingly, or like she has some kind of relationship with the puppet master behind the curtains, because the fact that she's referring to others as variants, it just makes me think, well, aren't you a variant? Maybe you aren't, or maybe she is a variant, just happy calling other variants variants. I don't know, but yet again, very, very intrigued. Sylvie asks what her Nexus event was, why did she bring her in, and she then says, what does it matter? Sylvie details, of course, it was enough to take my life from me, so what the hell was it? And she says, I don't remember, but she does a little smug smile, so she must remember. I mean, but I'm dying to know what it is. Yet again, we're getting some answers this episode, quite a lot in fact, of course, but even bigger questions remain. It also piques my interest, because if they're leaving details out like that, they still must be quite big ones, like what was the Nexus event that Sylvie created in order to be taken by the TVA. It must have been something that there's a reason why they're still not telling us what it is in this episode. The episode that gives us a lot of her backstory. The episode that gives us her backstory but leaves out the very reason as to why she was taken. It must be quite crucial. Now guys, the timekeepers, I was actually bloody happy with the fact that they kind of did them without doing them, because I was like, fair enough, they actually poised them as these kind of alien-esque things, and I was constantly, the cogs were turning my head, say, okay, so are these real? If they've gone through the effort of like, because you know with these MCU or just even MCU shows, you think, okay, it's going to be a bit of a cop-out thing, the timekeepers aren't the timekeepers, but you know, it's almost too typical of a prediction these days. It's like, well, of course the timekeepers won't be the timekeepers, even though they weren't, so that we're not going to see them as such, but they did show them as such, even though we were still kind of right with knowing they weren't actually genuine beings. They were just these androids. But I liked how they still gave us a little bit of a switcheroo, because they at least didn't just have an empty room. At least they showed some kind of androids that looked like these omniscient-esque beings who dictate the timeline. After a bit of conversation from the three mystical beings, this is when B-15 rushed in, takes their neck collars off, and then we have Loki and Loki, or Sylvie, back to back. This was pretty badass. I really enjoyed this. I do kind of understand, though, how some people are like, but why is Loki struggling, taking down guards when he's literally taken down much harder feats in the MCU. With, you know, it's relevant points. It really is, but you kind of have to kind of forget about that to really enjoy this for what it is. Now, in the last kind of attempt for the Timekeepers, even though they're not real kind of thing, they tried to reach out to Sylvie saying, "You're a child of the Timekeepers too, Sylvie. We can talk." And then that's when she says, "Oh yeah." She throws the blade, and he gets beheaded, and sparks come off because he's nothing but an androidy robot kind of thing. And all of them are. They all kind of laugh and beckon out. As the puppet master behind is almost like laughing at the fact that it's finally come out. And it made me quite interested when the main timekeeper, the one in the middle, says that you're a child of the timekeepers too. It's like, well, if that's the case, and she's a deliberate child of the timekeepers, so that's a deliberate dictate that she exists, well then why would you try and remove her from the equation? So I wonder what that line was all about. Now in this moment, Loki asks the question that I think we're all asking. He says, it never stops, then who created the TVA? And in this moment, this is kind of weird actually. So yet again, it's very easy to read romance out of this, because this is when Loki is approaching her. It's as if he was about to come out with something. It would have been too premature to say, "I have feelings for you," but he says, "Sylvie, no, I have to tell you something." She says, "How do you know that?" And he says, "Because, well, back on Lamentis, this is new for me. Like, he hasn't obviously fessed his feelings before, and as they said in the diner, they've had relationships before, but nothing that ever was love, or like, you know," and this goes back to what the showrunner says, and it doesn't discredit it, because there's a connection and there's love between the two, but not romantic. And this is when Loki gets pruned and he disintegrates, and we know he doesn't die, but I'm still wondering what he was going to say. Was he just going to say, "I'm not alone"? That would have been the very platonic kind of version, obviously. If it's to be believed what the showrunner says and how what affection exists isn't romantic, then I'm guessing he was just going to say something sentimental, but he's still not used to saying stuff like that because he's not used to being vulnerable. I guess it was going to be something like that. The only thing, look, I hate to be that guy, but I have to point it out because some people will, and it's only to be fair. The only thing that is, even though these moments are jaw-dropping, my jaw dropped. I was like, you know, until the post-credits scene where you actually see Loki wake up. And I'm not silly enough to believe that Loki, this whole show, this variant who is based around, is disintegrated forevermore. Not for 1 minute. But it's kind of hard to believe when you're kind of standing there watching someone that in real life you wouldn't notice. And I know it's a TV show, but still, you have to follow some rules, do you not? That freaking Ravonna, like a body, gets up, walks behind, and then goes bing. How do you miss that? You would hear the footsteps at the very minimum or whatever. Do you see what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to be an ass. I'm just, you know, it's kind of hard to believe that happened. But still, very cool moment. Very cool. Like, that aside, nitpick aside, I really loved this. And of course, between Ravonna and Sylvie, she wanted her to kill her. That's interesting. I think, obviously, Ravonna is very much so in some form of relationship with who is the puppet master, like she serves him or her. Let's just say it's Kang the Conqueror. And in that moment where she was like, "Do it," I think she wants to be pruned or exiled somewhere because she knows the wrath of the person that she could be potentially dealing with the fact that it's got to this point. Two variants now who are threatening, well, not the Timekeepers anymore, but the puppet master who was behind the Timekeepers. Which brings me to the teleportation of Loki himself, where he wakes up in this kind of post-apocalyptic New York. Now, you can tell this is New York because, well, yeah, I believe that is the Avengers Tower there, but you can see three different variants of Loki. One who seems to be, like, is that an ulterior version of Loki who is worthy of carrying and wielding Mjolnir? Like, is that an alternate Viking-y kind of version of Mjolnir, kind of like in the holograms that we saw, teasing like the hulking Loki, and then we saw like the Viking Loki with the furs over his shoulders? Is this like a version where maybe his brother died and he grew up taking the mantle of, not Thor, but like Mjolnir? Mjolnir, if you know what I mean. That would be a really cool version of Loki. Then we have Kid Loki, and then the Old Man Loki. Very comic book accurate here, from the crowns to the costume of Old Man Loki. I really love this. Now, they do detail when he says, "Is this hell?" which is a nice reference to his sister and just Norse mythology of hell anyway. Am I dead? And they say, "Not yet, but you will be unless you come with us." And that is where it ends, ladies and gentlemen. So what a fantastic episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, I could dedicate this next portion of the video to like speculating forever with, oh, what's going to happen with the 3 Lokis, or what's going to happen with Ravonna, and is she aware that they were animatronic, I can't freaking say that word, but puppets, androids? Like, there's all these questions that I find bloody fascinating. Like, what was the very reason, well, not the Timekeepers, but the person behind the Timekeepers wanted to extract Lady Loki, Sylvie, from her Asgard as a young girl? That's a lot of years that have transpired with this imposter behind the Timekeepers playing Puppet Master on the whole timeline. It's insane, and you can easily see with how this is all going to go into a massive clusterfuck of a mess at the end of all of this, with obviously whoever's behind it being taken down with some shape or form, that it's going to lead into the whole multiverse of madness, No Way Home situation. Who knows there, and how is that going to be governed from here on out? Is there going to be like a new TVA? Is the TVA necessary, or is the multiverse actually not as bad as what people make it out to be? Is the Time War actually a thing in this continuity? Did it actually reach that point? Because maybe multiverses can indeed coexist, like they often do in comic book worlds, without them warring with each other. Do you know what I mean? So overall, guys, I really enjoyed this episode. I just want to know if Mobius is okay after he got pruned. Let me know all of your theories, all of your speculations down in the comments. Is there any extra theories that you have based upon what I said? Maybe expand, feel free down in the comments below. By the way, subscribe if you're enjoying this channel and enjoying these reactions and reviews and recaps. Of course, like it, especially if you got this far in the video. Links, as always, are on the top pinned comment, which is my comment that is pinned. Click on show more and you'll see links to my Twitter, Facebook page, Discord server, Instagram, you name it, and Patreon, where you can support me further. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you people of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and fellow variants in the next video. Goodbye.